listening to the Cross-Check NHL Show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clarke.
Hello and welcome to the Cross-Check NHL Show. Thanks for making the Cross-Check NHL Show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We're free and available on all platforms, now including YouTube. My name is Mary Clarke, staff writer at For the Win, and you can follow me on Twitter at Mary C. Clarke. I'm here with Andrew Berkshire, NHL analyst for the Montreal Gazette and host of Game Over Montreal and Game Over International on the SDPN, who you can follow on Twitter at Andrew Berkshire. On this Tuesday edition of the Cross-Check, we have our first major trade before the trade deadline next month, with Tyler Toffoli heading to the Flames. So we'll break down what that means for Calgary and for Montreal. Next, Jack Eichel is set to make his Golden Knights debut on Wednesday, but are there more salary cap shenanigans afoot? Plus, we'll give it an Olympic hockey update with our predictions for the USA versus Canada women's gold medal final that's supposed to take place Wednesday, and I'm sure is about to tear this podcast apart. So, Andrew, before we start off today's show, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, surviving. I've got 3 more days where I'm staying up all night, and then I get back to a regular schedule. So I'm excited for that. I love the Olympics, but I'm ready for it to be over.
Yeah, we've hit I've been fatigued since last week. I think you guys could tell that we are tired. But yes, I feel the exact same way. But we're in the home stretch, Andrew. I mean, we still got the not the most difficult part to go, but we still got a lot to go in terms of like what we have to do. But we're in the home stretch. We're almost there. There's light at the end of the tunnel. The end of the week at least is in sight. I know it's only the start of the week, but there's a lot to look forward to and stuff like that. So it's gonna be a good time. But before we really dive into Olympic hockey, I saved that for last because I think that's maybe the thing people want to hear about us from the most because USA Canada gold medal game. But first, we're going to talk about the first major trade, at least we've had before the trade deadline. Talk started to pick up, I believe, on Monday of, Tyler Toffoli possibly moving to Calgary. And Montreal eventually did trade him to Calgary for Tyler Pitlick, Emil Heineman, a 2022 first, which is top 10 protected, and a 2024 fifth round pick. So that's the biggest trade we have had in some time. It's been a while since we've had a major trade like that. I can't remember how long it's been, mostly because no other time exists but the time that's happening currently right now, and I can't remember anything else. But yeah, Andrew, since you are, it always seems like when there's more Montreal Canadiens news than any other team in the NHL this year, maybe outside of the Oilers. And that's probably because they're so bad, historically bad, that, they're garnering a lot of attention. So what are your thoughts on this, Andrew, as, somebody who knows the ins and outs of the Montreal Canadiens and has, seen Tyler Toffoli, play for a while now?
I think it's a great trade for Calgary. I think that he's going to fit in really well there. Daryl Sutter has familiarity with him. He won a cup there. I do wonder if Toffoli won't produce as much offensively with the Flames just because Daryl Sutter seems to rely on him a lot more defensively than the Canadiens necessarily did. Like the Canadiens used him defensively, but they allowed him to be free offensively, and I don't know if Daryl Sutter will do that considering he already gives so much leeway to the Gaudreau line. So he might be part of the line that's more like, okay, let's shut things down a little bit and be more of like a 40-point guy than a 60-point guy, which he's been in Montreal. And I think no matter what, he's just such a good player. He's going to fit in perfectly there. They now have the luxury of putting like Blake Coleman down on the third line, which is like stuff that Tampa Bay did, so that's fantastic for Calgary. They look like more and more like a contender. Their underlying numbers are fantastic, but I think this is a great move for them. I still think their defense needs some work, but Daryl Sutter seems to be able to do a lot with not great people on defense. So,
and hasn't their goaltending been good this year?
Yes, I know Jacob Markstrom's fantastic.
Yeah, so he's at least propping up a defense that may not be as good, but he's been really solid this year.
Yeah, but their team defense has been great. That's the thing. It's just that you look at their defense core and you're like, okay, there's like Shillington and like Rasmussen's not even having that good of a year. Hanifin is their top guy apparently, but Hanifin's like not that good. So it
Mhm.
looks like a ragtag group, but it's performing really well. So maybe they just won't
Interesting.
mess with it. But yeah, the Flames look legit to me now. From Montreal's perspective, I said that the return was kind of underwhelming on Twitter, and I got a lot of pushback on that because, first round pick, a guy that was just taken in the second round. But Heineman seems to me to be a very hit or miss prospect. He has a great shot, but from what I hear, he's a obscene defensive liability. We'll say he doesn't really have the trust of his coaching staff to play a lot. So it'll be interesting to see if he even makes the NHL with that kind of profile. There's a better chance of it under this new regime than there would be under Marc Bergevin. I feel like there'd be no chance under Marc Bergevin, but it's it's okay. I thought for Toffoli, considering his contract, the term that he has left, how well he's played over the last couple of years, that he should be garnering like a first round pick and a higher tier prospect than Heineman. But if that was the market, that was the market, and they still got decent value. I think that the Calgary Flames trying to come out of the Pacific, like it's going to be tough to get past Vegas and Colorado. So getting a first round pick from the Flames, who aren't likely to be a division winner, is a pretty good spot to pick that, to have that extra first round pick, right? Like you're not trading it to Colorado and getting 32nd overall.
Yeah.
So there's some layers to it that are good. Like the 5th round pick, it's in 2024. So it's going to be like
That
8
2024
years before you even know what happens there
isn't,
if they
it's
use
not a
it.
real year. 2024
No,
is not a real year. We're not thinking about it. It's not even 2022. Don't know her. I have no idea what you're talking about.
exactly. And
So,
Tyler Pitlick is just a warm body. Like
yeah.
he hasn't fit in on the Flames. He's not a great NHL player or anything. He's just a guy.
Yeah,
So
he's just a dude.
the meat
So,
of it is that first round pick and Emil Heineman, and it's okay. It's not the best trade in the world, but I think that it does signal for Montreal what the plan is, because there's been no, like, I wouldn't say a lack of clarity, but Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton haven't wanted to label so much what's going to happen in Montreal, whether they wanted to do something relatively quick. In fact, Kent Hughes has kind of hinted that he wanted to rebuild like pretty quickly on the fly. But you don't trade a guy like Tyler Toffoli if you think you're going to be competitive in the next 2 years, which is how long his contract lasts. So this to me looks to be a bit of a deeper rebuild than maybe they've let on. And if that's the case, I think it's a good thing. It's just how many guys are going to be left over to stay with them, because I know Brendan Gallagher doesn't want to stay through that. And I think if you trade Tyler Toffoli, you're probably also going to trade Brendan Gallagher. And then you're looking at who's going to be the leaders through this. Jeff Petry's definitely getting traded because like the rumor is basically he wants out and his family's not in Montreal anymore. So there's fewer and fewer players that are there to stick around. And then it becomes, is it a 3-year thing? Is it a 5-year thing? I do think they could really use to rebuild that deeply, but it becomes harder to sell that to fans, especially after they've seen how bad this season's been.
yeah, I mean, the Rangers kind of set the high bar for in terms of, telling your fans how your rebuild is going to go. Then, of course,
Abandoning it immediately.
they got super lucky. So, but the original course was going to be like, I don't know. I think more teams should be more, honest and open about their intentions, at least with their fan base. I think that was just a very refreshing thing. I know this kind of deviates a little bit, but I know for all the flack we give Chicago, they've been more transparent about, their, you know, like hire like they're interviewing for the open positions in their front office. So, and like I said, I know that might just be, a PR thing. But I think we could probably use a bit more, transparency from teams, especially about like how long is this rebuild going to last? And I know that some people won't want to hear those things because that might mean, season ticket numbers go down and stuff like that. But maybe I'm just thinking from a fan perspective because like stuff like this causes a lot of angst for fan bases. But yeah, I mean like you said, the return for Montreal is a little bit underwhelming, but they're not really playing from a position of strength right now. I can tell you that much, Andrew. But flipping over to the Calgary side, you said that not that you would expect, but maybe you wouldn't be surprised to see Toffoli like take a step back in terms of his scoring on Calgary. So far this year, he has 9 goals, 26 points in 37 games, which, feels like a miracle on that Canadiens roster when absolutely nothing was going right. But what does this do for Calgary? You said this makes them a legitimate contender because the Flames are clearly making a play for the Pacific now. It's a really close race up at the top, and we're going to talk about the team that they're directly competing with in the next segment. But how does this move the needle for them? Because they are a top 10 team offensively, at least, by goals for per game. I know, not very smart analytics, but, I'm not the one always bringing the analytics here. But, I think it really makes them a more competitive team in a division that's probably the weakest. Like like night and day compared to the East, out in the West. And we've mentioned this before, but I think it, does a good job in, bringing a shooter onto that team. And, I think it can play well with a lot of the other playmakers on that team. But you mentioned that, he might not be getting, top billing minutes. And maybe that just speaks to, the strength of what Calgary's built, at least on offense. So what do you think this is going to do for them? Is this going to, make them like, are they going to shoot up to the top of the standings immediately and leave everybody in the dust? Or is it going to be, a kind of a slugfest out in the Pacific?
I don't know if they're going to shoot up to the top of the standings, but I do think that the advantage that Toffoli brings is like multifaceted. He's a player who can play in all situations. So he can play on their power play, their penalty kill. He can play first line, third line, second line. He can play left wing and right wing. Like, there is really no area where you can't slot him and expect him to be relatively successful. And it also allows them to build an offensive third line, which they've had Sean Monahan on the third line, and he's had a really, really rough season. He's really the only guy that's not lived up to expectations for them. So either dropping Blake Coleman or Andrew Mangiapane onto that third line allows them to get more offense out of both Monahan and Dylan Dubé. So you're going to have 3 lines now that need to be checked by opposing teams. And it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And then they still have their really physical fourth line of Trevor Lewis, Milan Lucic, and Adam Ruzicka. So like, there's just no running away from the Flames right now. Like, no matter who goes over, you're going to have to deal with something. And as much as like people clown on Milan Lucic for his scoring numbers coming into this year, like, yeah, they're legitimately terrible, but his underlying numbers have always been pretty good. So he has some defensive value. He moves the puck in the right direction, and he's physical. That does matter. So I think the Flames are just such a tough team to match up against now, and they might not have the high end of like the Oilers or the Vegas Golden Knights, but I think the depth is going to carry them through. I don't think they're going to catch the Golden Knights for tops in the division in the regular season, but come playoff time, they're not going to be an easy team to beat.
Yeah,
I
they're a
think they're
tough
going to
out.
be really, really frustrating.
Not
I
not
would tell you
just
how far behind they are, the Golden Knights in the standings, but I can't right now because the NHL's standings page doesn't work.
Oh, does it? Oh, that's
Yeah, so I'd have to check a different site.
well, it does say no standings information available. We're all
Yep.
having a day-to-day NHL, but
They're
uh
having a day every couple days. Like,
this
that
is true.
site is garbage.
This is true. Yes, it is very bad. I really should just find a different site to use, but it's, ingrained into my brain to use it. But
All right, never
you,
mind. They might actually catch the Golden Knights. They're 1 point behind
yeah,
with 3
they're like
games in hand.
they're really
All right,
close.
then. Yeah, they
I
are
mean,
really
it's
close.
we're gonna talk about it more in the next segment. I just wanted to mention, it's funny how you talked about Mangiapane, who has had a really good season. I mean, it sucks that I'm on the East Coast because it feels like that there's like a lot of really awesome storylines in the West that I have to stay up super late for. And we have mentioned this, staying up late and then trying to wake up early in the morning doesn't really work well for me. So maybe I'll, get more used to it as the season goes on. But he's been having a good season. It's funny how we used to talk about, Johnny Gaudreau getting traded somewhere, and he's having a really good season. He's got 58 points in 45 games for the Flames, 19 goals. Like, it's really neat to see kind of the narrative on this team turn around a little bit, because like there was for a little while it almost looked like the window for the Flames to kind of pass them by a little bit, or they needed to retool, and they seemingly have retooled without, taking a huge step back. They have, you know, they're super competitive, and that might just be because the West is not nearly as competitive as the East, but they look like a strong team. And you're right. I don't think that they're going to be, at the top of the, Pacific when all is said and done at the end of the season. But I think that they're a big team primed to upset somebody. Maybe, they have the feeling that they could upset, a Vegas or a Colorado in the playoffs just because of the way they play and how hard they play. And just how irritating of a game they play because, they've got Lucic, they've got Kachuk, like they're just it's a, it's a, not to say a murderer's row out there, but they are a nasty team to play against. And they've got good defense and really good goaltending too so far this year. So they're stocking up. But coming up next, we are going to talk about another Pacific Division team that is, making moves. And this is of the internal kind because Jack Eichel is going to play his first game with the Vegas Golden Knights, the first game in of the season and in some time. So we're going to talk about Jack Eichel's return to the NHL coming up right after this. Got a beard? Get Primal. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get Primal. Maybe you're that guy who has never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Primal Origin Oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. The products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients and with low impact on our planet. Primal Origin Oils makes balms, oils, whipped butter that are renowned as the best feel in beard products available. All products are fair trade certified and handcrafted in the USA. The combo kits make a great late Valentine's Day gift or are perfect for any other holiday. And if you're shopping for yourself, you'll be glad you did. We know that every company claims to have the best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and the feel in beard to the other products you've used. We promise you will see and feel the difference. Remember, the code Locked On gets you 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. Use the promo code Locked On at checkout for 20% off. All right, Andrew. So like I mentioned before the break, Pacific Division, kind of the star of the show here on this podcast, because a couple of things, big news items happened early in the week. And that second big thing, it's actually probably the biggest thing in terms of, hype, I guess, is Jack Eichel. He's making his Vegas Golden Knights debut on Wednesday. I don't remember who they play because I didn't write that in the doc, but he is making his debut on the season on Wednesday. And, this is basically around the time frame that was, talked about when he first, was moved here to Vegas. And it's finally coming to fruition, and it's going to be a really great story. I mean, I don't really know what to expect from him after so much time away from the sport of hockey, but it's going to be a really awesome sight to see because we've talked about it on the show before how much he has gone through in his hockey career, and especially over the last years with his injury issues and being jerked around by the Buffalo Sabres. So this is going to be a really awesome story. And I want to talk about that first before we talk about, people's complaints about the cap management of the Golden Knights because is it Nikita Kucherov 2.0? But first, I wanted to, just touch on how heartwarming it is that, Jack Eichel is back. And it's really great. And the NHL is better with him in it. And I really hope he finds, new life out there in Vegas because he really hasn't gotten his fair shake, it seems. And, at least Vegas seems to be, they want to build a contending team. Buffalo never seemed to want to do that around him. And Jack Eichel doesn't have to be the centerpiece. And, I think this is going to be, really good for him. And I'm excited to watch him. So what do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see it too. I think that it's been almost a year since Jack Eichel's played in a game. He does carry a 4-game point streak coming into this game, which is kind of fun.
Does that count across
It
seasons?
counts for me.
Okay.
So
Sure.
I think it counts, especially when it's ended by injury. But I think that my main takeaway, he's coming back versus Colorado, by the way.
Oh boy, that's gonna
So
be
it's
a
playoff
ooh,
atmosphere right off the bat. It'll be interesting.
yeah.
But my main takeaway is Jack Eichel was right. about the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's back already. The Buffalo Sabres were wrong. That's my takeaway, is he should have been allowed to make this choice before. He could have been back in the NHL a lot earlier. He may not have even been traded. But here we are. He's going to be in the Golden Knights lineup against the Colorado Avalanche on Wednesday. It's going to be really exciting. I hope he scores right away. I hope he just like rips one immediately, and he's the Jack Eichel that we all remember. I can't wait to see it. I think that there's a possibility that he won't be still, because that's always a possibility with back injuries, but I'd like to see him stay healthy. As for the Mark Stone stuff, I mean, he's been injured all year. As much as it's definitely a little sketchy because they had to clear a bunch of salary, and we all know he'll be back, probably in time for the playoffs. Just keep him healthy. They aren't in danger of losing their playoff spot, I don't think. So maybe a little sketchy, but it's not Nikita Kucherov sketchy.
Yeah, it's a little more nebulous because there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no timetable for him, right? Because the Lightning gave some sort of like timetable that's like, oh, that lines up very conveniently with the playoffs type of thing. So I know that before we get into that, because I know, I at least want to have a little bit of a discussion on that. Yeah, the Sabres were wrong with Jack Eichel. And it seems like they've been wrong this entire time about him. So I'm glad that he's away from that organization that didn't seem to, have his health and other, stuff under like as a priority for them. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I bet if I'm a betting person, if I was a betting person, I bet the Sabres will regret this move and regret not getting Eichel the surgery he wanted. But only time will tell in that regard. But yes, going back to the, Kucherov, comparison, in order to make this work, because the Golden Knights were so, flush against the cap, they had to put Mark Stone on LTIR, who, as you were right, Andrew, has been injured for most of the season, a good majority of the season. Yeah, and the comparisons to Kucherov, who, as we all know, because this only happened within the past year, was put on LTIR and then basically came back for the playoffs, and was a factor at least in the reason why the Lightning won back-to-back Stanley Cups, and that got people a little angry, I think, to say the least. So throwing my predictions into the future, Mark Stone stays on LTIR and then, comes back magically in the playoffs, because in the playoffs there's no salary cap. That's how it works. That's kind of how I always imagined it. There's just no salary cap. You can just do whatever kind of. So yeah, we could be looking at like a similar situation here, at least in terms of the backlash, but I don't think it's the same. Like I said, it's a more nebulous situation here in Vegas.
And
There's
the fact is, like, even Kucherov's thing, like, he was on the timeline that was expected from the surgery.
yes.
It's just that he came back so quickly in the playoffs and was so amazing so quickly. I think
Don't get
that's
me
what had
wrong.
people pissed off. But
Don't
at the
get me
same
wrong.
time,
I'm
like,
not mad at that.
neither am I. And here's the thing. I hate salary cap whining. I'm so done with it. Like, every team that is capable of doing it does it. Like, I remember when the salary cap was first instituted and the Philadelphia Flyers brought a team out of the salary cap era that was full of like grindy, old, slow, crappy defensemen, and they got absolutely murdered the first year out of the salary cap era. And then suddenly Mike Rathje and Darian Hatcher were suddenly on LTIR forever. And then, Chris Pronger, who signed the 35 plus year deal, he was suddenly on LTIR forever when he wanted. I mean, he had major
Yeah, I
concussion
mean, he was
issues,
injury.
but like, every team manipulates the cap as much as they possibly can. And if one team is doing it better than the other, then they're just better at it than your team. And what you should be pissed off at is that your team isn't as good at breaking the rules as the good
Yes.
team is.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. And I can feel the, arguments from people, coming up again, especially because, if Jack Eichel, really shoots out of the gate here, is really fantastic, and helps carry the Golden Knights to the top spot in the Pacific. And then, they get Mark Stone back, and it's, a really easy addition. They didn't have to pay anything other than just waning out the time to get him back. I can see the same conversations happening again, but you're right. It's very smart. Like, it's very smart to find these loopholes within the NHL's system and exploit them. And I applaud the Lightning for doing it. I think it's very savvy, very smart. Um, like you said, you should be mad at your team for not employing these strategies and trying to manipulate as much of the cap as possible in order to build the best team as you can. We want fun, exciting hockey, and this is at least a way to get to that point because more play like higher level players cost more money. That is just how the system we live in, and that's good because they deserve to be paid. But the NHL salary cap is not nearly going to be as large as basketballs, for instance. And I look at the big Ben Simmons trade that happened in the NBA, and then the NHL crowd comes out as like, man, I wish the NHL trade deadline would be as nearly as exciting as this. It's never going to be. It never will be, because they play in two different worlds in terms of like their money. Maybe the NHL can get there one day, but considering who is at the top of this league and who is making the decisions, I don't see it. But I think that this is at least good for the excitement of the league in terms of like I mean, I know it's kind of X's and O's, more inside baseball, I guess, but more good players on a team means a more exciting team, means playoff fun and playoff success. So I'm all for it. I wouldn't be surprised though if the NHL eventually cracks down on stuff like this, maybe in the next CBA agreement of some such. I don't know. Like, because if it happens 2 years in a row, maybe they're like, we don't want this. But I think the NHL would be getting rid of something that is it's just neat. Like, it's neat to see teams think outside of the box in terms of what they do to add players to their team and construct the best roster possible, and you should want that for your team. So instead of disparaging the Lightning and the Golden Knights, you should be wishing that your team was just as savvy as their front offices are. And yeah, it is going to be a dogfight, I think, in the Pacific, and I think they're probably the most interesting story in the second half of the season. I mean, because you've also got the Oilers there too, and
The Pacific races are more fun.
yeah,
The Ducks are falling off. The Kings,
Yeah.
Oilers, and Dallas is in there for the wild card spot as well. So the wild card spot in the West is super interesting. The East is super boring. I mean, all the best teams are in the East except for Colorado and I guess Vegas and Calgary now, but the actual races are in the West.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. It is unfortunate that the East is all but locked up, and I know that the Atlantic seeding is at least interesting uh, in a vacuum, but it's probably going to be more interesting when we get closer to the end of the season. But the races in the Pacific, because that's where the real moves are going to be made. There's going to be a lot of, movement in terms of, player additions out west because it's so wide open outside for, Vegas, Colorado, and Calgary now for penciling them into the number 2 or number 1 spot. But there's a lot of open ground out there in the West, and teams, will want to try to make the playoffs because even a couple games of playoff revenue is still good, especially in a pandemic year. Again, because we're never getting out of this, it seems. But I think coming up next, though, we are going to do a big Olympic breakdown of the stuff that has happened since the last time we talked, because both the men's and women's teams for both countries are in full swing, and we're going to have a gold medal game to predict, and I'm predicting I will be very sad. So we're going to talk about the Olympics coming up right after this. Football might be over, but basketball season is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where you find the next coach fired is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number 1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Speaking of the Olympics, Andrew, we've got some interesting results from the Olympics. First, we're going to start with the women's team because I think that's the one most people want us to talk about because After looking a little bit shaky, the United States has made it into the gold medal game set for Wednesday night. And Canada was on cruise control this entire time, it felt like, and also is in the gold medal game. And it's how we predicted it would be. I was a little bit nervous after the Canada loss in the round robin, just because I could see USA was missing opportunities. And then against Czechia, they were missing more opportunities, and uh, they were losing for a very short period of time, but it felt very off for this team. But their more recent game felt more like a return to form. Um, and I still am not going to predict them in the gold medal game, but I'm excited to see what your take on this is, because at least the women's tournament is about to wrap up, and I'm very excited because it's what we all predicted, it's what we all wanted, and now it's finally here. So, what are your thoughts, Andrew, coming into Wednesday, and do you have a prediction?
Well, I'm sure this is gonna bite me, but I cannot see this Canadian team losing. They are unbelievably incredible offensively. They're the best offensive women's team I've ever seen. The depth that they have, the ability to score in bunches, they just don't get rattled. And this time they won't be playing on the second half of a back-to-back. I think, like, I have a ton of respect for the US squad, but I just think this is not their year. The coaching issues that they've had, the players that they've left on the bench the entire time, they're just not going to have the punch I think this Canadian team does. Like, the Americans are the second best team in the tournament easily, but I don't know if they can catch up with the Canadians' star power. Like, they just have so much power up front. And then the defense, which was expected to be not that great. And I mean, defensively, they haven't been amazing, but the defense has been so active in creating offensive opportunities that it looks like they're on a power play half the time when they're on even strength. Like, they are so special. And then you have Emery Debian, who's just been incredible this whole tournament. I think this is a really, really tough one for the USA. I think it's the toughest one they've faced
Yeah,
since 2006.
I was gonna say this feels like the toughest team Canada we've seen, or at least I've seen in some time. Not to say that, like, the Canada is pulling ahead of the US in terms of, country strength overall.
No,
Like, they're
it
still
was
on the
just how the
same.
things fell this year.
Yes, exactly. They're still on the same playing field. It's just
Yeah.
Canada is just ridiculous this year. This is like the first time in a while, or at least I can remember, that it feels like, at least on paper and the results we've seen in the past, it feels almost lopsided in terms of, offensive production. Um, and you're right, Team USA still has the coaching issues, the benching stuff. I still don't understand. The the power play at least looked a little bit better. They've gotten more interior chances, but I still think that there's more that they can do there. So personally, I'm predicting a 4-2 Canada win, with Marie-Philippe Poulin, of course, as the game winner, because why not? No overtime, even though that would be really awesome. I just think that Canada is too good in this tournament, and they deserve it. They really do. They played an incredible tournament, and I don't think I think even with the coaching issues that USA has had, I think maybe just their talent, like, alone would have probably won out in this game. But I think the US is just a little bit too far behind the 8 ball, unless, of course, I mean, hockey is a
It's
random
a
game.
game of, yep,
It's a
anything
game of
can
chances.
happen.
Anything can happen, and you can get goalied really easily. Just wacky nonsense can happen, especially, if you're in a one and done tournament like this is. So anything can happen, but at least based on what we've seen so far, I'm predicting a Canada win. I don't think that that's unreasonable. I'll be at least happy if it's a competitive game. And I'm glad that the US at least made it to the medal round, because I don't know, I just have this feeling that's somebody might upset them. Maybe because all of this talk about, Canada and the US being in their own echelon of teams. I was like, we feel like we're ripe for an upset, because we're at that point where, like, it can happen in women's hockey. And it's fun when upsets do happen, but I was like, the US just feels primed for one of those teams where this could be upset territory. But I was happy to be wrong, but I am looking forward to the game regardless. Do you have a score prediction, Andrew, or are you just gonna, predict a Canada win out here?
I'm gonna harken back to the men's tournament from 2002, and it's gonna be 5-3
All right.
Canada.
All right, I'll take a high scoring game. Those are fun.
They are.
It's gonna be fun. And the first game between them in the round robin was so exciting. I hope it's a good game. I think above anything else. It will suck to lose to Canada, but they're just so good. I mean, like we've seen it throughout this whole tournament. It's going to take a lot on the American side to beat them. It's possible they do, but at least the way the chips have been falling throughout the rest of the tournament, I do not see it happening. So that's at least our prediction for the women's side. But the men's side is a little more interesting because maybe it's just me downplaying the United States men to my disadvantage. But the U.S. surprisingly beat Canada 4-2 in the preliminary round, and they've looked better than expected. And I don't know, Andrew, how closely you've been following the men's tournament because I feel like I was like, oh, it's a bunch of college kids and former NHLers on the American side. Maybe, I don't know, maybe because 4 years ago the Americans were so terrible and like disappointed so heavily that I kind of discounted these guys from the outset. But no, it seems like the US is playing better than expected and they beat Canada. I know it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things in terms of,
Unless you're CNN.
yeah, where they're like, it's Miracle on Ice. No.
Yeah.
Like I get, beating Canada is fun and all, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. But was this surprising to you, Andrew? Because to me, it was surprising. Maybe I'm just blinded by my disappointment from the men's team, back in Pyeongchang, where they just weren't they like? I feel like they were like 7th or something. I don't know. They were bad. It was bad. It wasn't a good time. I had checked out very early on that team because they lost games they probably shouldn't have lost, and so maybe this is just me projecting my feelings onto them. But I'm surprised at how that they beat Canada and are coming out of their group on top. So, what do you think?
I'm not that surprised. I think that any time that a team that goes with youth and speed, and another team goes with older and grindier, it tends to work out better for the team that goes with youth and speed.
It's like USA and Canada kind of flipped
Yeah.
from the men's and women's side. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that Canada is better than what they've shown so far. I'm like questionable of maybe it was that they started the wrong goaltender as well because you look at that
Oh
game and they actually
yeah.
did pretty heavily outchance the USA in that game, so maybe that was part of it. But I mean, when you're getting beat to pucks at important times, that's how you get breakdowns and goals get scored. The goaltender that's in for Canada now, Tompkins, seems to be significantly better than Eddie Pascal, so very interesting to see how that works out. I still think they should have gone with Devin Levi, if only
Yeah.
just for like getting him the reps and him being possibly Canada's goaltender of the future, because I think he has like franchise goalie potential. But I don't know. Canada doesn't really interest me that much. Like I'd love to see David Desharnais and Eric Stahl win, but for the most part, I would have rather they have gone with a lot more younger players, and they didn't. So I think they kind of made their bed, and now they have to lay in it, whether it's winning or losing. I don't know. I think they match up better against every other team except for like USA
And
and maybe Russia.
I think it'll be different if they, have the correct goalie against the
Yeah,
US last time. Not to pin, their loss just on whomever was in goal who I don't remember.
Eddie
But
Pascal.
yeah, Eddie Pascal. Not to pin their loss on him. But it definitely seemed that if that was at least a weak spot in that game. But I mean you can tell by like how not I guess enthused but like at least I was surprised because I wasn't expecting the men to do that much. Maybe it was just me discounting it. But I think that they've put together a solid squad. They've put together a lot of college kids who, are like you said, playing with speed. And even though they haven't, played together and stuff, they just seem to mesh really well together. And it's had a really nice feel to it in terms of, like I know we all want best of the best and NHL players, and that would probably, that would bring a lot more hype, bring a lot more eyeballs to it, but it's still been at least a neat story to follow because um I was not high on Team USA on the men's side because, they had a disappointing run. They just haven't really been able to do roster construction well. And this leads back to even their times having NHL players, on their roster. So I don't know, but it's at least a neat story to follow. And that gold medal game is Saturday, so we'll at least have our episode on Friday to deconstruct the USA Women's Canada game, the gold medal game, and then we'll also get to preview the men's gold medal game if it's USA Canada there, because I have no idea what the format looks like. I've been busy with other things, but it's exciting at least. It's I think hockey is better when both USA and Canada are good. uh Mostly because it drives people's eyeballs to the sport, and that means they'll watch, other teams play too. But I think it's good that both USA and Canada at least are doing well in this tournament, because that means they have the potential to meet in the gold medal game, and that is what we all want, is USA Canada, and for it to break my heart once again, because I can never have good things. I'm excited for Wednesday. I know we're switching back to the women. I'm excited for Wednesday, but I know what's going to happen. But I'm still excited for it because it's such good hockey. The first game was, really fast paced, really just unbelievable hockey, and I'd love to see that again. It just is a really unique atmosphere you don't get anywhere else. But coming up next, we're going to finish off the show with our pop culture segment, where Andrew and I talk about what we've been doing, and I'm excited to see if Andrew has done anything with his time over the weekend or nothing at all. So we'll do that coming up right after this. It's the time of year where I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I'm actually enjoying eating them. Have you tried the puffs? If you don't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be our new favorite. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Yes, puffs included. 100% real chocolate. That's low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. They are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Try flavors such as mint brownie, coconut almond, and new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They're all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how, but they pull it off every time. So go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, Andrew. So we are in our usual pop culture segment of the week, of our recordings. I didn't really do a lot of pop culture stuff because the Olympics are here still, and the Super Bowl happened, and that was a big time. I did finish playing Final Fantasy VIII for the first time, but I don't need to dwell on
Love
that.
that
It was
game.
good. Yeah, it's great. It was really fun. I basically broke it in the opening couple hours and then never looked back to not being overpowered, because that's what you can do in that game. It is a really interesting level up system.
Yes,
But
junctioning allows you to really progress quickly.
also, the story didn't go where I was expecting it to. I was told that it was a romantic comedy, and when they started pulling out stuff about space, I'm like, all right, you know what? Final Fantasy shenanigans, I see you. So it was a really nice, like, lighthearted story to go through, because it's got some feelings, and it's got your typical angst of
Teen angst.
Angst,
It's
and
definitely
also
I find it's the most teen angst Final Fantasy.
yeah, this is true. But I enjoyed it for what it was, because even though it was ridiculous at some points, I don't know, it worked for me, and I think a lot of that had to do with the cast, because they're pretty great characters, if I do say so myself. I like
They're
them a
super
lot.
fun. That's honestly my personal favorite Final Fantasy. I love how customizable the characters are. I
Mhm.
love how much you can like play with abilities, and I really
It
enjoy the
really
limit
is, yeah.
break functionality in that game,
Mhm.
and especially Squall's trigger functionality to make him hit
Yes.
harder.
Yep.
And I
It's a
love
lot of
me.
fun.
What do they call it? I don't remember. Is it a gun sword? No,
Gunblade.
gunblade. I love the gunblade. So
Yeah, it's
stupid and
really
yet so
cool.
amazing.
Yeah, it's a really cool weapon. So I played it on Switch because portability and stuff like that. But yes, it was a good time. I'm glad I did it. I haven't played many Final Fantasy games, and I have a lot of them on my backlog. So I thought now would be a good time to start one, and um, because this was kind of short, all things considered. So yeah, I had a really good time with it. I'm looking forward to Horizon Forbidden West, which comes out on Friday. I'll probably talk more about that on our show on Friday. But for me, mostly it was that the Olympics because they're still continuing, and then of course the Super Bowl, which was a wild time. And for the first time ever, I won money in my family's squares thing. I don't know if you know what Super Bowl squares are. You basically get so you get like it's basically a giant chart and there's numbers 0 through 9 on each axis, and you can put down your name into like the boxes, and the score has to line up between each team. So I won the second quarter and I won the final score. So they do it for like each quarter, like first quarter, half, third quarter, end of the game. I wanted the Bengals to win, but I won nearly $100 on squares, so I'm not going to be too mad about the results of this game because at the end of the day, I don't care and I won money. So I did a lot of Super Bowl stuff, lots of Olympics. What about you, Andrew? Is there anything you've done over the past couple of days since we last talked?
Not really. My weekend was spent mostly just trying to catch up on sleep. I watched like a couple episodes of Drag Race with my wife in the evenings because there was no hockey games in the evenings. All the Habs stuff was in the afternoon. So my good buddy Julian McKenzie covered that for me while I was sleeping. But yeah, there wasn't too much, honestly. I didn't even get to watch any of the Super Bowl halftime show yet. So I've heard that's amazing for my
Yeah.
generation. So
Yeah.
excited to see it, but it won't be anytime soon.
Yeah, it was good. I feel like I missed out on something because not that it wasn't my generation. I did not listen to a lot of hip hop and rap growing up. I knew a bunch of the songs, but that's just from pop culture osmosis. And I know I'm outing myself as just like a general white girl. I'm sorry. I grew up and was an emo girl growing up. So that's kind of, when we get, there was an Evanescence commercial, like parody commercial. I was like, yes, if this was the halftime show, I'd be freaking out in the same way. But I'm glad people had fun. It was really from a showmanship perspective, it was awesome. The music was great. It just flowed from one artist to the next really well. I think maybe they should do more of those, multi-artist things and just go back and forth between them because like there was no really like major downtime. It just kept flowing from one thing to the next and it was awesome. Or just bring them back again next year. I don't think people are going to complain if they come back again because it was really cool to see, and I think it was a really awesome show. But that's all we have for you today on the Cross-Check NHL Show. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure to follow us on your podcast platform of choice, from Apple to Odyssey to Spotify and YouTube, and rate and review us while you're at it. You can follow the pod at Cross-Check NHL on Twitter, me and Mary C. Clarke on Twitter, and Andrew at Andrew Berkshire on Twitter. Thanks for making the Cross-Check NHL Show your first listen every Tuesday and Friday. We'll be back on Friday with some more puck talk, but now make your second listen Locked On Bets. Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling.